Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we're going to talk about the Season 2 of Take the Initiative, Top Cuts. As usual, we got a top 16 players who managed to get themselves at least a 6-2 during the league this month, and that are going to be playing in a top 16 direct elimination style tournament. So, as usual on the TTI League, a lot of good players are going to be playing, some that you've seen in previous seasons, as well as new players. Um, and here's the metagame breakdown. So we got 3 Boba Green, 3 Han Green, 2 Sabine Yellow, 1 Sabine Green, 1 Boba Blue, 1 Thrawn Blue, a Tarkin Green, a Palp Red, a Shirut Red, a Luke Green, and a Krennic Green. So overall, I would say relatively representative of the meta that we can find outside. Definitely a lot more Han Green, maybe, being the most represented deck alongside Boba Green. Probably the influence of me winning the previous edition of the tournament definitely has probably influence on players. So a lot of Sabine as usual, a lot of Bobas. No Iden whatsoever, but we see and a couple of oddities, a couple of decks that are a little bit outside of the meta that people are going to be experimenting with. So this is one of the thing with the TTS League is that even though it is pretty competitive, some players like to experiment and try new decks, and it's an excellent place to try your new ideas and put them to the test against the best players. But sometimes experimenting leads to better result than actually playing with a meta deck, and this is something I want to emphasize on is that me, for example, on the previous season, I've decided to go with Han Green, even though in my head, I would have maybe in my head I was thinking back then that Boba Green was the best choice. But experimenting led me to play with a deck that I was very comfortable with, and ultimately this is more important than playing with a strong deck, with a quote-unquote stronger deck, whatever that means. I think the meta is extremely open, and I think in a meta like this where there's a lot of different decks that are available, I think you're better off going with something you're comfortable with. You're better off going with a deck that you've played yourself a lot and that you've been experimenting with, rather than a meta deck, because it's going to lead to better results. And this is what I've experimented last time with my hand green deck, and I think it is generally true. So a deck that is a bit outside of the meta might not mean a bad deck at all. Like it actually might mean the opposite of that. So as I said, it's not because you're choosing a deck that is not as a bit out of the meta. It doesn't mean that you have lesser chance of winning the tournament. Because if you do play this deck better than you would play a meta deck, you're better off going with that deck. And the meta is so wild at the moment. There's no guarantee that your deck is worse than the meta deck. Especially the people who are in top 16. All those players are very good. So they obviously know what a good deck looks like. So the deck that they're going to produce are going to be pretty powerful as a result. So we're going to go from the top. So the players are ranked depending on the matchup. So for example, the first top 60 matchup is going to be Breaker versus You Can Call Me Al. So Breaker are Australian folk, a very strong player, well versed in the Boba realm. As you can see, his version is relatively classic, but he has taken some ideas from the K2OD version of the deck, playing the Recruit and the Gamer Morin Guards. So I think this version is relatively solid. Personally, I prefer Viper Probe Droid. Consortum Star Viper over Gamer Morin Guard personally, but it's a solid choice nevertheless. I love the split of the Bosk Syndicate Lackeys. There are situations where Syndicate Lackeys is better than Bosk. For example, you need to ambush. You can one-shot a Boba Disintegrator. You can one-shot a Sabine without dying. There's some situation when Syndicate Lackeys is better than Bosk. So I like to have a 2-1 split, because then you can kind of choose, depending on the situation, which one you want to play, which I like quite a bit. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to go down to Steadfast Battalion, because I think Steadfast Battalion is very good if you have Isia, but if you don't, then it's not so good. Also, the Recruit encourages you to have a wider diversity of different units. As you can see, he's playing a lot of shielded units. The cartels, the smugglers, that also decides to go for the Bip Fortuna. Bip Fortuna is, I think, a weapon that people use against control to have more sticky threats. I'm not personally not a massive fan of it, but I would rather play, if I want to have a 2-drop that is good against control, I would rather play a short trooper personally, but it's not a thing that we've never seen before. Very light on, okay, no, 10 2-drop is actually pretty decent. Okay. The rest of the deck is pretty classic. In the sideboard, it's again relatively classic. You do have the Emperor's Legion, but no big top end. We don't see any walkers, no relentless big top ends to go alongside the Emperor's Legion, and a cunning that we've seen lingering in some lists. Hasn't really fully established itself as being everywhere, but still a card that you see lingering. Some people play it as a 3-off, some people don't play it at all. It's a little bit over the place at the moment. The next list and his opponent is going to be You Can Call Me Al, who is running a green Gram of Taken. And so I had the occasion to talk about with Al. So Al is a player who makes it to the top cut every season. So he's someone who is very good at the game. And I had a chance to talk to him a little bit about this list. He basically tells me that the list is very good, but it just does not very good versus Boba. So he thinks that the list is very good, but unfortunately not a great matchup to be paired versus Breaker on the first round. So we'll see if he managed to change the odds here. He does have a few weapons against Boba. He does play 3 Traitorous. He does have the Stats of Battalion ECL tech to one-shot the opponent. So Gram of Taken ECL is actually, I have a lot of nostalgia for this deck because it's actually the very first deck I've ever built in Star Wars Unlimited. So that was back in September 2023. Obviously, back in those times, we didn't have nearly as many cards. But to be honest, I don't think that, unfortunately, the deck hasn't really got a lot of tools to get better. Yeah, I think double green is simply just a very underpowered color combination. It's probably the weakest color combination in the game, in my opinion. All you get is Command, which is a decent card. The Gram of Taken, I think the two problems with the deck is, first of all, double green is very underpowered. The second problem that he has is like it doesn't have a very clear game plan. Like it's obviously a ramp deck. Here you can see he's playing the 3 resupplies, the Super Laser Technician. But I would if I was going to be playing a ramp deck, I would much rather ramp into a Vader or into a Palpatine, because the idea of ramp and the reason why ramp is so good in Star Wars Unlimited is because it allows you to not only get your big threat faster, also gets your leader faster. And Gram of Taken is a very cheap leader, so it doesn't really benefit a lot from so the first resupply is going to be very good, but then any other ramp beyond this, which you're very likely to have because the deck plays 9 pieces of ramp, is not going to allow you to achieve your leader faster. So, for all those reasons, I'm not a very big fan of it. I mean, the leader's ability is pretty nice, but it is not something that you're really trying to achieve in a control deck, in a ramp deck, sorry. So, very old school. He also plays attack pattern Delta. I personally don't like the card at all, but would like to see how it works out. Plays the Emperor's Legion. As a 3/4 Sentinel, it does have a few officials, and Gram of Taken himself is an official, so I get the 3/4 Sentinel. It's pretty decent. So yeah, we'll see how that works out for him. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not super optimistic. The deck has also almost no removal, which is basically Treacherous the only real removal for the deck. So the deck is going to be lacking interactive. I mean, he does have Barrage and Command, obviously, but it's yeah, we'll see how that works out. I'll be very happy to be proven wrong, and see if this deck can perform. And once again, if it's shown that Gram of Taken ECL is another strong deck, then that the meta is going to get even more diverse, and that would make me very happy. So we'll see how that works out. Then we got Rebel Resource, a YouTuber who has a great YouTube channel, probably one of the most dedicated Sabine Yellow players on the planet. Like, he does play a ton of this deck. He's been tweaking this deck, working this deck out for a very long time. If you want to know more about his deck, you can check out his YouTube channel. And apparently he went first place on the Madison 1K tournament. So he had some success with the list. I mean, to be honest, all the players in this tournament have won some sort of tournaments. As I said, a lot of good players taking part in this league. So no surprise that they also win tournaments in real life as well. So what can we say about this list? So there's a couple of interesting stuff going on. So there's the sneak attack, which is a card that is quite situational, but on the right target can be very powerful in Sabine Yellow. You can get out a K2SO early, attack with K2SO, deal tons of damage. After K2SO die at the end of the turn to deal 3 damage. Very strong also with black one. You can get your black one turn earlier, attack with the black one, then it dies, and you get to draw 3, discard 3. So personally, it does card advantage, but you can get. So there's a couple of interesting fails. Sneak attack on Fleet Lieutenant is also very strong. Get to play Fleet Lieutenant for 2 resources. And the cool thing is that he can actually give +2/+0 to himself and then attack for 5. So it's actually a pretty nice little combo here. Sneak attack can be a little bit clunky if you don't draw with the right target. And it is also a card that is not heroism, so it makes your 4 cost ability a bit worse. But apparently, Rebel Resource thinks it's worth the gamble, so it goes for this. It has a couple of interesting stuff. Also, the Azeroth Liberator gunship on top of the Vinland Falcon, in order to really help out in the aggro mirror, I would say. So, and then the rest of the deck is pretty classic. The sideboard is, as you can see, he's not really caring too much about control. He has 2 Spark of Rebellion in the sideboard to fight against control, as well as the black one, which I'm assuming also the Fang Fighters. But he's not. I don't think he's built his deck really to fight control. Like you would see, if he was really scared of control, you would see the Spark of Rebellion going into the main deck. So yeah, I mean, cool deck. I mean, we've seen this deck over and over again, seeing quite a bit of play, but and for a very long time, Yellow Sabine was the most popular aggro deck in the game. Recently, Green Sabine has really taken over the meta in a big way. But we'll see if Rebel Resource is able to prove us the power of this deck by showing a big performance. He will be facing Stubley, who is bringing for the second time Shirut Red, and I think Shirut Red, I believe, has a pretty good matchup versus aggro. I could be wrong, I'm not a Shirut expert, but this particular deck here, I think, seems to be quite well built versus aggro. Obviously, the Sabines and the A-Wings to interact early on in the game against the threats. The restore from the Yoda. The Jedi lightsaber on Yoda can be very oppressive to deal with if you don't have the specific answers for it. Rebel Resource does not play Wele, does not play Traders, obviously, so that can be a problem. And then in late game, if the Shirut Red managed to stabilize the game well enough, he can go Redemption and heal himself back up. So, also plays System Patrol Craft. So, pretty cool list overall. Pretty classic, I would say. He has obviously the 3/4 throw. So this is the pretty classic Shirut deck, I mean, as far as I can tell. In the sideboard, we get some anti-control tech with the Forced Surrender, and also the K2SO, which I think is a good tool against control. Some people played in the main deck because they're good synergy versus fourth throw. Here, I decided to play it in the sideboard, which does not surprise me. And obviously the Flying Fighters to deal with the Traders, which are incredibly oppressive against this deck in the sideboard, and also against control, I'm assuming. So pretty much pre-sided versus aggro with a 3 Macon opening and against Boba. The deck is also relatively well equipped against Boba. You get the Redemption, you get the Macon opening. So we'll see if it's able to put up a great performance. Shirut Red, in my opinion, is a deck that I think is pretty solid. It feels to me that it's a deck that is pretty does not get crushed by anything, but it has trouble really dominating in any meta. It's a very mild deck. So it comes down a lot to the skill and also to the draw. Also 3, the 4th is with me in this deck, which obviously makes sense because with Shirut. Okay. Then we got I'm So Humble playing Boba Green as well, and his version is pretty interesting. It has the 2 walkers in the main deck. Maybe to help against control. 1 recruits 2 cunning, and 1 rook, which is not something you see very often. The sideboard is very anti-control with a 2 Relentless, 1 more Reinforcement Walker, and 3 Confiscate. So I think Confiscate has been I think it's actually not a bad idea to play Confiscate in mirror of in the sideboard of Boba, and the reason is it's very good against 2 cards that are very good against you. Entrench is an incredible way to stop Fire Spray and to deal with Fire Spray. And it's a great way to deal with Traitorous. The problem is we are in an open deck list tournament, so if the opponent sees that you are going to be siding in 3 Confiscate, he's obviously going to take out the Traitorous out of his deck. But maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe you want to scare your opponent by playing the Confiscate. So, in any case, it's a good list. Yeah. Oh, by the way, that is interesting. He actually only plays 2 Super Laser Technician. And this is something I've predicted, and I've said before, is people are going to be, if people decide to remove ramp out of Boba to make it to have less ramp in Boba, they will take out the Super Laser Technician over the resupply, because especially in the control meta that we are in, resupply is a better card than Super Laser Technician, because what happens Super Laser Technician, you play it and your opponent has no unit on the other side, you cannot crack it, and Boba has no way to kill his own Super Laser Technician, so what happens is that you're not able to use a Super Laser Technician in turns that it matters. While resupply is impossible to interact with, you play the resupply, you ramp, no question asked. So I've said this in the past, and I'll say it again. At least in the current meta, resupply is a better card than Super Laser Technician, especially in Boba that has no way to kill his own Super Laser Technician. So if you ever want to go down in ramp and have less ramp in your deck, remove the Super Laser Technician, shave on the Super Laser Technician instead of the resupply. And it's exactly what I'm So Humble did here, which I think is very clever. Obviously, that's going to make his ramp slightly less consistent, but I think it's not the end of the world. Also, he has the recruit to find Super Technician, I guess that can help. Okay, then we got Conor Kiz, who is also playing Sabine Yellow, but a different take on the deck. Also, something I forgot to mention, but no Guerrilla Attack Pod in either deck. Guerrilla Attack Pod is not super great, especially Guerrilla Attack Pod is a card that we've seen less and less in aggro decks, but more importantly, it's a card that in Sabine Yellow specifically is even worse because you don't have access to ECL, and I think Guerrilla Attack Pod is a very good target for ECL because you can ECL and then ready the attack pod, and the attack pod is a bunch of attack, and that can be very, very, very powerful. But here you don't even have ECL, so it makes the Guerrilla attack pod even worse. This time, a few differences in the choice. The shoe back half for the aggro mirror, I'm guessing. 3 Spark of Rebellion in the main deck to really protect his control. More copies of R2D2. But not really a whole lot to really take advantage of it. I mean, it does have the Metal Ceremony on the sideboard. We'll see the black ones going in the sideboard. Bamboozle in the sideboard. I'm guessing this is a way to deal with Shalsen. I think Bamboozle has been kind of a super strong card versus Shalsen. And the Wolf. And still a 2 sneak attack showing up again. So we got 2 Sabine Yellow in this tournament. So if you're a fan of Sabine Yellow, it would be interesting to see how those deck performs. Next we got Obin Ob9 playing Han. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Ob9. He's definitely a new player that I haven't seen in the top cut before. He's playing a Han deck, which is fairly similar to my version. You see the 2 Vanguard A's. The concept is here, the 3 Traitorous. But there's a couple of things that he has changed. First of all, he's playing the R2D2 C3PO package, which is interesting. So, as I said, R2D2 C3PO, it's a package that is, I've talked about this in my previous video, how I feel about this. I think, just the long story short is, I think it's quite good against control, especially if you can draw them together. You can basically pair R2D2 C3PO on turn 1 by using Zan's ability, get back the card you've lost, and then from now on you can draw a card every turn if it's not dealt with, 4 health, a lot of health. But I think it's very weak against aggro, and I feel like for Han Green at the moment, aggro is our weakest matchup. So I would not advise anybody playing this because I think it makes the aggro matchup weaker. Um, because yeah, you basically hang on with a bunch of units that can't do anything against aggro, which is a bit of a pain. You also play Ezra Bridger, which is a card I have personally have a very bad experience with because I just never draw any card with him. But it's obviously not a pretty decent. It's a pretty decent card. It pairs well against the 3/3s, so it's definitely a playable card. He's not playing the sorry, the skirmisher. I put them in the sideboard. That's gonna make the Boba matchup a lot weaker because uh, skirmisher he doesn't really have any backup plan if he cannot go double ramp from hand from 5 to 7 to go and into U-wing. There's gonna be a lot of matchup where he cannot go for that double ramp thing, and then he doesn't really have anything of value to play in those turns outside of Traitorous, but Traitorous requires a good target for it. So I feel like he's missing that piece of the puzzle. Um, Playing the Confiscates in the sideboard, okay. Yeah, that's fine. And then plays the uh, the Reinforcement Walker. So I would say overall it's a version that sounds pretty well played versus Control, but maybe not so much versus aggro. So we'll see how that pans out for his version. His first matchup is going to be playing against yeah, bad. He's playing against Buku. He's playing Buku. So Buku is playing Sabine Green, a version that is fairly similar to the one we've seen doing well in the Richmond tournament, with the 3 Medal Ceremony, 3 Rebel Assault, the 3 R2D2, even go as far as playing 3 Akbars. And the reason why some aggro players have been playing Akbars is because it provides board presence that is hard to get rid of, a little bit similar to R2, as well as having immediate impact on the game, killing something very good in the mirror of aggro. So this is like the green Sabine that is built to kill other Sabine decks. Like he's playing also 3 Dodonas, even plays the 2 Zeb in the sideboard, the Bright Orb in the sideboard. So it's oh, I don't care about the control matchup. So it's not a list that is very well built for the control matchup, but it's a list that is extremely optimized to beat aggro. So yeah, you see he's even playing the Spec 4 soldiers in the sideboard, so really doesn't care much about. I feel like this version will struggle a lot against control. But against aggro, it's obviously probably one of the best versions you could play, I think. Once again, we see the disappearance of the Echo-based Defender because it doesn't match up well against the 3/3s. We've seen that over and over again. No Gary attack pod again, so that's kind of the new trend. So, Buku is going to be playing against Ob9. Normally, I think Anne Green can have a pretty decent matchup versus Sabine, but I feel like the version of Ob9 is going to struggle because if Buku goes full space, you better draw your Million Falcon. If you don't draw Falcon, if you don't draw Bright Hope, is going to be a problem for him. Okay, next we got Devastator. So basically, we've seen all those control decks, right? All those full control decks, right? And Grand Throne is like, why not me? Why not me? And this is, in my opinion, the best Amiral Throne Blue deck I've ever seen. If you really want to try to play Throne Blue, I think it's a pretty solid list for that. So you can see it has all the maybe something I would suggest for this list would be maybe to plan a little bit more for the control mirror, having maybe some restock in the main. But it does play 3 vigilance alongside the 3 bounty hunter crew. Maybe more blue card to be able to play Charleston is also something I would consider. But yeah, I think the list is pretty solid. It does play a few more units than the traditional like old spell blue control decks, but it's still the idea is here. You got the entrench, you got the power of the dark side, you got the removals, you got the vigilance out of aspect, and then you got the top end a Super Laser Blast and Devastator. So something I really like in this list is the synergy between blocking the board using entrench, no good to me dead, tapping people down thanks to your Grand Mail Throne's ability, and then wiping the entire board with Super Laser Blast. I think it's this synergy here is basically the reason you play the deck. Also being able to play the Super Laser Blast for 1 turn earlier using Big Fortuna, I think is a very big deal. Also being able to play those Vigilance for 1 turn earlier with those Big Fortuna, these are like kind of a key aspect. We got the Greedo as is not really used as an aggressive unit, but as a removal, and this is a very strong removal because we're talking about a card that will deal 5 damage fairly consistently. Because thanks to Granomil's Roll, you can see what's on top of the deck, so you can kind of play around this, and then you can go Greedo, reveal the top, and kill something for 5. And because it's you're milling out of your own deck, you're playing a lot of events, making Greedo very, very consistent. One of the biggest reasons to be playing yellow-black control is Bounty Hunter Crew. Bounty Hunter Crew is, in my opinion, the most powerful control card accessible in yellow-black. The ability to get back an event in hand is incredibly powerful. It can be used in numbers of ways. Of course, it's very strong late-game value. Allows you to get back vigilance in the control mirror. Be able to get back even vigilance against aggro mirror, and be able to get back to Super Laser Blast is just incredible in this matchup. So I think it's the biggest reason to be playing. Some people might be surprised to see a Boba Disintegrator in a control list, but Boba is here for the synergy with Thrawn, so you tap down something, then you can attack with Boba, and you can double attack. So he's once again kind of a removal on the stick, just like Greedo is. So I feel that the list looks is pretty solid. I don't know how I feel about AT-AT Suppressor and Kondoku in this list, but they are here. And the sideboard, we got more Vanquishes, the restock for the Mirror Batch, some repairs for the aggro matchup. Yeah, I wonder if he should be playing some Search Your Feelings for the Control Mirror. I don't know. But he seems pretty well prepared against the Control Mirror because 3 Vigilance, 3 Bounty Hunter Crew without Aspect Penalty, I think it's going to be very solid. Okay, next is my list. I'm not going to talk about it because I've already had a dedicated video talking about it. Just how I feel about this matchup. I feel like it's a pretty good matchup. I said it before and I say it again. I think the Han Solo has all the tools in the universe to deal with control. It has extremely strong recursive late game with Ob9, U-Wing reinforcements. So very resilient deck. A lot of ways to create value with Bright Hope, Ob9. Unit that comes into play ready, like Falcon, that we can play multiple times. You play this, then you play Falcon, you play Ob9, you replay the Falcon, and stuff like this. We have Hand Disruption in the main deck, Spark of Rebellion, even more in the sideboard with Body Rook. This deck simply has all the tools in the universe to deal with those control decks. So I feel like overall, Han Solo is just very well positioned against hard control decks, whether it's Thrawn or whether it's any other control deck for that matter. So I feel like it's a pretty good matchup. Next we got Hippo, who is playing his own version of Han Green, but as you can see it is quite similar for mine, playing once again the Echo base. There's a few differences. He's playing some Liberatory Gunship just like I do. I don't know if he took that from me or if he took that from someone else, but it is definitely something that helps a lot in the control, in the aggro matchup. He's playing some out of aspect Regional Governor that can be grabbed from U-Wing Reinforcement. I actually like that. You can come into play, name Super Laser Blast that can be very effective. So I think it's a pretty cool idea. I like this. Play some Cunning in the sideboard. Shave a few cards here and there, so shift some Surprise Strike, shift some Waylay, in order to make space for the couple of spicy cards. Play the Reinforcement Walker in the main. That is also interesting. So yeah, overall I like his deck. He's playing Mon Mothma, but he does not play that many rebels. So Mon Mothma, basically from my experience, Mon Mothma has been missing. When I play Mon Mothma, it happens regularly that I simply don't find anything. And compared to my version, my old version, he's playing one less Leia, one less Rogue Squadron Skirmisher, one less Bright Hope. So his version is even less rebel-centric than my old one, so I feel like he's going to be missing out on a lot on Mon Mothma. So I could be wrong, but like the stats are not super great. But outside of this, the deck looks very solid. I think the Regional Governor into U-Wing is a pretty clever idea, and we'll see how successful that is for him. Next we got the Jango playing as Krennic. So pretty classic Krennic deck. Yeah, pretty classic. I'm kind of like a little bit skeptical on the fact that he decided to play 2 Vigilance. I feel like not having the 3 vigilances in the mirror of aggro in the mirror of control is gonna be a very big problem for the deck. Um, so in my opinion is either you decide to go for the overpowering approach and playing like a bunch of stuff and then playing Emperor's Legion and play a bunch of Relentless and stuff, or either you go for the Vigilance meal. And here Jango decided to go for both. He has the Relentlesses in a sideboard with the ability to search for the Relentless with Search Your Feelings. He's playing all the Devastators and stuff. So he has the possibility to play overpowering approach, but he also has the possibility to play Vigilance meal because he has a Vigilance sideboard and a restock. But in my opinion, I think he would be better off really choosing what he wants to do instead of going a little bit of both. Because for me, those two game plan kind of work against each other. So I don't know how much I feel about this. But the rest of the deck is fairly classic Chronik stuff. So not much else to say about it. We'll see how well he does. He's going to be facing Hippo. So this matchup I feel is pretty favorable for Han. I think, especially since Hippo is playing 2 reinforcement walkers in the main deck. By the way, Hippo did the semi-final in the previous tournament, so very good polished player, and he actually lost to my Han deck, so maybe he's thinking that he should play it too. Then we got Dylan. Dylan is running card by card my Palpatine deck. So the Palpatine deck that I've shown on my previous YouTube video, it is card by card the same deck. So it's cool because then you get to see this deck in action and see how well it does in the meta. I think it's a very well positioned deck. I mean, it does very poorly against aggro. I think it's an only major weakness. But Dylan has been quite lucky on the pairing because he's on the side of all the aggro decks are on the other side of the bracket. So you got 3 Sabine decks and they all are on the other side of the bracket. And on the side of the bracket that he's in, there is no aggro decks. So that means he's not going to encounter an aggro deck until the final. And if an aggro deck ever managed to do the final. So Dylan definitely got lucky here on the pairings with this deck. And from that point, he's a very good player. And he's playing a very strong deck that is extremely well positioned for the side of the bracket that he's in. He has a lot of great tools to fight against control. And he's going to be facing a Boba Green deck, which I feel like is a pretty decent matchup for Palpatine. So I feel like he's going to be very well positioned. Then we got Volor, another polished player who is basically a friend of SIP. So they've been working together on a new version of Boba, their own kind of take on the Boba, and their take is that Cunning is an amazing card. That's basically their take. And that's why you can see this is a pretty classic Boba version, excepted that it has 3 copies of Cunning in the main deck. And yeah, that's really what it's all about. The sideboard, we got some Relentless, some Change of Heart, and 3 Body Rooks, so very heavy anti-control sideboard. And also the Swoop Racer also is an anti-control deck as a way to put more pressure against the control player, more threats. So I feel like this is so the main deck is kind of anti-aggro, the sideboard is very anti-control, and we'll see how he does, and we'll see if Cunning managed to get through. Then we got Destiny Riku, a player who did a couple of top 16, a top cut in the earlier seasons, and a player who has been grinding the mess out of Luke Green. He's been playing Luke Green, and he's played so many games with that deck, so he's someone who's very comfortable with this deck. And as you can see, his version of Luke Green is pretty wild. He plays a lot of unconventional things, like for example the Out of Aspect Spark of Rebellion in the main deck, the Confiscates in the main deck, and a couple of random stuff like Homestead Militia, the Escort Skiff. So he's someone who's very comfortable with his own deck. Basically the Spark of Rebellion is obviously an answer to him struggling a lot against control, which is not a surprise. Luke Green does struggle a lot against control, it's well known. So Spark of Rebellion and Confiscates are both of this. Confiscates, I feel like I would feel so much better about Confiscate main deck if it was in a tournament where open deck list was not a thing, because then you can really take your opponent by surprise on the Entrench and on the Traitorous. But in a deck in a tournament where there's open deck list where everybody knows what everybody's playing, I don't feel as good about Confiscate because it's very simple to just say, okay, well, I'm simply not going to play a Traders, but maybe this is what he's intending to do. Okay, I'm going to play Confiscate, so then I won't have to deal with Traders ever again, which could be a smart idea. So we even see a Shadow, Power of the Dark Side out of aspect in the sideboard. Which can really take people by surprise, but once again, in a deck with open deck list, might not be taking people by surprise as much. The rest of the list is relatively classic. I'm not a big fan of the Forces with me in look. I'm not a big fan of the Forces with me in general, by the way, but in look, I'm really not a big fan. But we'll see how well he does. He's gonna be facing X2. So for people who don't know, X2 is actually the player Geekoen, so the player who won the biggest US tournament, the 5K tournament, and with his Vader control deck. And this time he's bringing something different. He's bringing Boba control effectively. So he's basically said, okay, I'm going to be playing the same idea as my Vader deck. I'm going to do the same concept but with Boba instead of Vader. And this is what he came up with. So his naming is the most prestigious online deck list because in reference to my thumbnail on my previous video where I was saying that the TTI is the most prestigious online tournament, which I still believe it is, by the way. Anyway, so what is the deck all about? So as you can see, it is basic. I think the basic game plan is you control the game using Entrench, Power the Dark Side, Make an Opening, Vigilance, Vanquish, Takedown, and then you kill the opponent very quickly by focusing on space. As you can see, most of his units are space units. The units that are not space units are basically removal. So Greedo is a removal. Bosk is a removal because of ambush. Bounty Hunter Crew is also a removal because he has ambush as well. And basically, you're going to be controlling the game with those units on the ground and with obviously your blue events. And then in space, you're going to beat down with 7th Fleet Defender with Fed Fire Spray. And here, Boba is actually used more for his leader's ability, where you're going to be using Boba's leader's ability to be able to answer things more efficiently, be a bit more resource efficient. Boba, when summoned, is not going to be used for the big Boba turn that we all know and love. It's going to be used as a removal, basically as a removal on a unit. Once again, Boba is mostly going to be used as a removal on the ground to control the game on the ground, to not be overrun, and then the deck has the possibility to kill very quickly with the Fast Fire Sprays and stuff. So it's a bit the same idea as this Vader Blue, because Vader Blue was very controlly, and then the Vader comes out. So obviously here we are a little bit less on the control side of things, a bit more on the aggro side of things. It's still a control deck, I believe, but it is definitely a lot more, it has the ability to close out game a lot faster than other control decks. So obviously it comes at a cost, because yellow is not as good of a color for control as red, for example, because you can only kind of tempo things out, you can't really kill those things permanently, which is a bit annoying, but you do benefit from the Bounty Hunter Crew Vigilance combo, which means that the deck is very well prepared for the mirror match. He has Search Your Feelings, Restock in the main deck, Bounty Hunter Crew, Vigilance in the main deck. Very well prepared for the aggro, for the control mirror. And also, this allows him to play Spark of Rebellion with only one aspect penalty instead of two, more Bounty Hunter Crew in the sideboard, more Super Laser Blast, more Avengers for the mid-range matchups, and some Devotions as the anti-aggro mechanic, because he has very durable units like Boba Fett, which allows him to attack over and over again. So this deck is very interesting. We'll see how well it performs. Obviously, X2 is an excellent player, so excited to see how he's going to perform with this deck. His first matchup is going to be against Destiny, and I think this is a good matchup for X2. And the reason is because Destiny mid-range look is not great versus control. It's not the most powerful deck against control, and X2 is clearly a control deck, even though it has some ability to kind of ramp up pretty fast and kill pretty fast in the air. It still remains a very hard control deck. So we'll see how that pans out. So as usual, I will update you guys about the result of this tournament, on how it went, um, and I'll let you know how it went once the tournament is over, which might take a few weeks because it's a tournament where people kind of schedule the games whenever they have time. It's not a strict schedule, so it can take a while for everything to unfold. But all the games that are being played on this tournament is very high level. Every games are streamed, so make sure to check them out if you want. Anyway, thank you very much for following this video, and if you like that kind of content, as usual, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.